Great. So I'm Philip Arkcoll again from Worklytics. Clicker's there, it's great. I wanted to start off by asking a question about people's definition of employee experience. A lot has been said about employee experience over the past few days, and I think Josh Bersin led the keynote, and one of the things that he said was that he himself is not sure anymore what employee experience is, because so many people are using different terms. Vendors are using that term as well. So I wanted to talk about what we think about employee experience at Worklytics. But before I do that, does anybody want to offer their definition of employee experience, or at least what they think is important when it comes to employee experience, just to get us all started? Maybe wake you up a little bit as well. I know it's been a long two days, getting ready to go home. Anyone want to offer theirs up? Anyone?
Tell us, Peter. Tell us.
Tell us. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what ours is. But I'd love to at the end then hear what some of yours are as well, if you have any. So we think of employee experience in a slightly more holistic way than many of the other ways that I've heard about it before. We think about it as all of the moments that define the unique experience inside of your organization, the day-to-day moments in people's lives, not just the interactions with HR, but interactions with your managers, with your peers, with the rest of the organization, and how they influence your time inside of an organization and what they make it like to work there. There's been a lot of talk over the past few months about how this is the year, 2019 is the year of employee experience, and I think the reason is clear to a lot of you here in this room. The war for talent is stronger than it's ever been. Unemployment rates continue to be at record lows. Tenures are getting shorter and shorter as millennials and the next generation move into the workforce and have different expectations about what a work experience is like and how long they should remain committed to an organization. Not just that, employee brand is obviously more important than it's ever been before. Social media influences that, and a lot of recruitment teams today are living and dying by what their ranking is on sites like Glassdoor. A bad review on Glassdoor can make it very difficult for you to attract talent. And here's an example of one funny one where somebody recommended, would say about a company in Santa Clara that they'd only recommend this to their worst enemies. If I were to be a candidate applying for this company and I read that, I would probably think twice about joining their team. So much so is this an issue that recently, many of you may have seen this, the Wall Street Journal released research showing that it appears that a number of companies are now trying to game their Glassdoor scores by encouraging employees to give five-star ratings. Certainly a strategy that seems to be working well in the short term, but if you don't invest in your employee experience in the long term, it's probably not going to work out as well as you're hoping it to. All of that is to say that employee experience is having its moment right now. And I think there's some parts of the employee experience that we're actually doing relatively well, particularly when it comes to the first 30 to 90 days in an organization. There are now lots of different tools to help with the interview process, with hiring, with your onboarding, as you integrate into the organization. But what happens when you finish that process and you leave the warm, inviting hands of HR and go out into your team, into the rest of the organization? There's a long gap in connection and engagement, and it can be as long as 6 months, sometimes even a year, before you touch base with human resources again in many organizations. And we're surprised that people may not have had the best experience over that period of time. So we think of this gap and these gaps between these touch points in HR as the Wild West of employee experience, or the next frontier, if you will, where HR actually today doesn't have that much influence on employee experience. It's more up to the manager, the day-to-day interactions with the manager, with peers, with leaders, and with the rest of the organization to really shape what your experience is like inside of an organization. And so we at Worklytics are very focused on helping organizations understand this gap and the day-to-day moments within this gap that make up the experience for employees inside of an organization. And we do this by analyzing what we found to be as one of the few and the best data source for the day-to-day moments that occur inside of an organization. That is all of the digital tools that people are using to collaborate, communicate, and do work on a day-to-day basis. So we analyze this metadata to look for patterns that are associated with either positive or negative employee experiences in organizations, and we encourage managers to take action proactively and continuously throughout an organization. So here's some examples of a few of the common actions and insights that we recommend to organizations and we've recommended to managers before. Some of these may appear to be relatively obvious, but I think when you see them with the data behind, they'll probably be interesting to you and will help encourage these types of behaviors. So one of the key insights when we first go into organizations is we look at how many managers are having one-on-ones, what are the practices around that, and we're amazed to see how many managers still don't have regular one-on-ones with individuals in their teams, don't have them scheduled in the calendar. And there's data that we've seen in organizations that merely not having it scheduled in the calendar, it doesn't matter whether it was a good meeting, whether you actually discussed something, just the fact that you don't have it as a reminder on a recurring basis significantly increases the probability that you're going to have dissatisfaction on your team. So this is a no-brainer for most organizations in a lot of different roles. We've done a lot of work looking at using network analysis to look at employee experience and what it looks like in networks inside of organizations. One of the key things that we found is that issues with experience typically appear in clusters within organizations, in small groups of individuals who work together on a regular basis. So much so that if your direct peers, the people that you work with every day, are dissatisfied, you're multiple times more likely to be dissatisfied as well. And so it's important when you're thinking about employee experience, not just to think about process and individuals, but to think about the surrounding groups that individuals are in a day-to-day basis and attack the problem from that perspective. Another piece of advice that we commonly give organizations is to focus on social integration, particularly in the first 6 months when people are onboarding. Are they effectively making connections across the organization, integrating into the social layer, meeting the people that they need to meet? We found in many organizations that isolated individuals, particularly those who don't integrate quickly, are far more likely to be dissatisfied and to attrit early on during their onboarding process. So it's worth paying attention to this. A very obvious one, managers play a key role in employee experience. What we found by looking at behaviors of managers and their impact on employee experience is that the best managers are multiple times more likely to hold on to talent in their teams. So it's further data to show that it makes sense to invest in coaching and empower managers to influence and think about the day-to-day experience of their teams or their parts of the organization. And lastly, one of the key insights that we often discuss with customers is how important it is to take early and continuous action on things like employee experience in organizations. We ran a survey of managers in a recent customer of ours and asked managers whether they had taken any action to improve employee experience on their teams. It doesn't matter what they'd done, whether they'd had an offsite, had a dinner, had drinks after work, any action at all. And we found managers that had committed to take at least one action were significantly less likely to lose individuals from their teams. So it's important, again, to ensure that managers at the team level are proactively involved in addressing these issues. So those are just some of the highlights of the types of insights that we are focused on. We think of these as low-hanging fruit. They're obvious things to do, but typically busy managers, busy organizations tend to forget about these types of actions. And so I think some of you may be wondering, what do you do with all this information? What do you do with these types of insights? And there's been a lot of talk by some of the other great speakers over the last couple of days about how important it is to pull actionability from insight, from data, and actually make real change inside of organizations. And so that's what we at Worklytics are really focused on. We apply machine learning to analyze over 400 of these day-to-day moments and interactions in employees' lives, from interactions with managers to employee life cycle, compensation, and things like work-life balance. We provide reporting at a group, department, and manager level, highlighting key issues that are affecting the experience in parts of the organization. We track all of this in real time and nudge leaders through things like Slack, Microsoft Teams, and email to take action early, address these issues. To take action early and address these issues while they can still have a major impact on them. All of this is delivered in a really easy-to-use interface. We provide access down to the manager level, global level access, and we have reports for individuals as well inside of organizations. We're Worklytics. We're focused on data-centric employee experience. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, we have a booth outside. We love to show you in more detail. Thanks very much. Any questions for anyone? I'm happy to answer them.